Marilyn Monroe was an iconic beauty, actress, and model who concealed her battles with stuttering, dyslexia, and mental illness behind a dazzling public image. The world knows her as the ultimate sex symbol, the embodiment of blondes have more fun. But how could a dumb blonde reach the heights that Monroe did? Athlete Joe DiMaggio seemed the perfect companion for the starlet, but who was Monroe's real true love, and why? And how did she become one of the most recognized actresses in the world when she was dyslexic and spoke with a stutter? Welcome to Fame and Fortitude, where we explore the inspiring success stories of famous personalities while decoding their drive, an incredible personality tool that uncovers our motivations and provides strategies to overcome challenges. Before the world knew the blonde bombshell, Marilyn Monroe, she lived in a life of pain and struggle. Born Norma Jean Mortson on the 1st of June 1926, she lived in the greater Los Angeles area, bouncing from caretaker to caretaker. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, was a party girl who just didn't have the time or inclination to take care of a child. She lost custody of her first two children, and this pregnancy came after an affair with Charles Stanley Gifford. At just 2 weeks old, Monroe was given to a strict and pious couple who ran a family-type orphanage. She would never know her father. Gladys didn't completely abandon her child, though. She would visit on the weekends and paid for Monroe's expenses. When Gladys needed a child in order to qualify for a home loan, she promptly removed Monroe from the orphanage at age 7. In less than a year, young Monroe was on the phone with the police as she watched her mother devolve into a nervous breakdown. Gladys was institutionalized with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Monroe was taken in by Gladys's best friend, Grace McKee. Grace instilled in the young Monroe how beautiful she was and how she could be a movie star. Grace would dress Monroe in beautiful dresses and often take her to the theater and would bring her to work to expose her further to the filmmaking industry. It was the mother she had always hoped for, but Monroe's hope was soon destroyed when Grace married Irwin Goddard, and bringing his own daughter to the family, Monroe was just too much to take care of, so she was returned to the orphanage. As Goddard's wealth increased, Monroe was returned to the family at age 11. Monroe's dream of an actual family was soon shattered, though, as her new father got drunk and tried to essay her. Grace did not believe her. Monroe developed a stutter and became even more withdrawn, lagging socially, emotionally, and intellectually behind her school peers. In 1955, Monroe recalled, "I guess you could say I gave up talking for a while. I used to be so embarrassed in school. I thought I'd die whenever a teacher called upon me. I always had the feeling of not wanting to open my mouth, that anything I said would be wrong or stupid." She was moved about to other relatives' houses, and to try and escape another trip back to the orphanage at age 15, Monroe married her 20-year-old neighbor, James Doherty, whom she had been dating. She dropped out of school and became a full-time housewife. According to the Drive system, Marilyn Monroe's life can be associated hypothetically with a validator/intellectual combination. Drive unlocks the doors to understanding your core motivations, the primary drive, and how you achieve your goals, the secondary drive. Drive is an acronym for Director, Relator, Intellectual, Validator, and Executive personality types. Directors celebrate a love for freedom, creativity, and overcoming challenges. Relators thrive in relationships and serving others. Intellectuals are fueled by knowledge, high standards, and organization. Validators are motivated by recognition, personal acceptance, and being needed, and executives embody a grit for winning, control, and problem solving. Marilyn Monroe could represent the validator drive through her focus on personal acceptance, being needed, and receiving personal praise. Her secondary intellectual drive would be seen in her future through efforts to study, do classwork, and seek therapy to always be bettering herself. A person's secondary drive is usually the means to achieve their primary drive's goals. Thus, in Monroe's case, her intellectual pursuits could have been a means to garner more approval, validation, and success. In 1945, after her husband entered the Navy, Monroe took a job at Radioplane Ammunition Factory. It was here, on the lines, where she was discovered by photographer David Conover, who was taking pictures for an article in Yank magazine showing how women were helping in the war effort. Conover convinced Monroe to work as a fashion model, and soon she was within the Blue Book modeling agency out in Los Angeles. Monroe was a step closer to her Hollywood dreams. She dyed her hair blonde to increase her chances to get more modeling jobs, and within 6 months, she had modeled for over 30 magazines. In 1946, the agency got her a screen test at 20th Century Fox. She received a 2-year contract, but was only in 2 minor roles. Ben Leon in the casting department was credited with helping Monroe develop her stage name, Monroe from her grandmother and Marilyn from an actress Leon had worked with. Monroe was afraid of the camera and afraid of messing up, but her drive as a validator pushed her forward to get the admiration that she craved. So she turned to her secondary drive as an intellect and began studying. Monroe worked 3 hours a day on acting, an hour on dance, an hour on vocals, and an hour on fencing and horseback riding. "I so wanted to become better, to change, to learn," remembers Monroe. She further developed the Marilyn Monroe character. Depressed after her contract ended, Monroe pushed forward and did what she had to do in the male-dominated industry. "Yes, I slept with producers. Everyone did it. If you refuse, another girl is waiting outside the door who will do it." A producer got her a contract with Columbia in 1948, and during this time, she studied with the acting teacher Natasha Lattès for 6 years. Together, they developed the new identity known as Marilyn Monroe, focusing on her movements, body language, and speech. She received some of the earliest plastic surgeries to further hone her character. Audiences and producers began to notice Monroe in her minor roles. The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve, her star continued to rise fast. In 1951, Monroe was back with 20th Century Fox, now with a 7-year contract. Producers didn't take her seriously and always put her in dumb blonde roles. Again, when Monroe did not feel validated by the industry, she pushed herself to study more. She took acting lessons with Mikhail Chekhov and mime classes from Lotte Goslar. Classes from the University of California in Los Angeles were added as she studied poetry and art. She amassed a large library of over 400 books. Niagara became Monroe's first positive role as the main character, a villain plotting the death of her husband. Monroe's ambition was too much for her husband. They had divorced back in 1946. But Monroe was a real superstar and married Joe DiMaggio, the famed baseball player, in 1954. Unhappy with the weekly $500 wage she was still receiving for her movies despite her stardom, she founded her own production company in New York with photographer Milton Green. She studied acting in New York with the famous teacher Lee Strasberg. She is the only star that challenged the Hollywood elite and won. 20th Century Fox invited her back with a $400,000 contract for 4 films. Though Monroe was finally happy with her ideal husband and her ideal career, things began to change for the worse. In 1956, the newlyweds lost a baby. She blamed herself, but insomnia got the star hooked on barbiturates. Monroe discovered that her ideal husband was ashamed of her public persona. Depression soon engulfed Monroe's life. When she was not getting the validation she knew she deserved, she did the only thing that always brought her back. She took time off and she studied. 1958, Monroe was back on the big screen with Some Like It Hot, winning her a Golden Globe for her performance. Her high, though, would follow quickly with a second miscarriage. Monroe withdrew more from the world, and the gulf between Miller and Monroe widened, and in early 1961, they would divorce. With a family history of psychiatric disorders, Monroe found her thoughts turning dark, and she was placed into several psychiatric hospitals. Therapy had always been a part of Monroe's life, another intellectual pursuit she took on to seek understanding and validation of herself. She was diagnosed by Anne Freud with borderline paranoid schizophrenia, which subsequent therapists supported. The mask of Marilyn Monroe was becoming too difficult to sustain. At age 36, on the 5th of August 1962, Monroe was found dead in her house from acute barbiturate poisoning. Drive is a powerful tool in analyzing ourselves and others. For another Drive story, click on the next video. At the height of her fame, Marilyn Monroe battled stuttering, dyslexia, and mental health issues. Despite these challenges, she channeled her inert drive to seek validation and her intellectual curiosity as tools to cope and thrive. Her love of learning may have helped her overcome her stutter and dyslexia, and her desire for validation gave her the strength to maintain a public image despite her personal struggles.